Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for another session of Critical English Grade 7. Today we'll be moving on to characterization because we've been doing a lot of work on narrative writing and this is one aspect of it. So with us today we have Alicia and we have Azaria. You can say hi to the persons online. So thanks for joining us if you're on the live or if you're looking at the recording later. Thanks for making the time to look at this and you may learn a thing or two. So thanks again for joining. So our topic for today, like I said earlier, is characterization. And it's a big word, right? It sounds long and whatnot. But what does it sound like? What's a shorter word that you know for that? Or that sounds similar to it?
Correct.
Characters, right? So remember when we were talking about stories and so we said you can have characters and your characters can be what? Persons. Animals. Things. Even things can be your characters, right? Once they're doing the action in the story and they, have feelings and so forth, they can be your characters. So your characters don't have to be real. They could be imagined as well. So you could be dreaming, and if you dream up a scary monster, the scary monster can be a character as well. It just depends on how you create the story around it, right? So characterization then we know has something to do with characters, right? Do you know what it has to do with characters? Is it same? Is it another word for characters or does it mean something different? We know it's longer. Should I tell you? Right, I'll think about it. Let's go to the other slide there. So if you look on the screen now, you'll be able to see 4 characters. Can you recognize the movie I took them from? No? And yes, that's Mirabelle. So they're from Encanto, right? Those are characters from Encanto. Do you know the other 3 characters? So the second one is Antonio, the third one is Bruno, and the last one, the strong lady. You don't know her? Louisa. So I suppose you haven't seen this as yet. All right, so these were some that I chose from a movie I thought you guys had looked at, but you didn't. So since you didn't, you'll have to name some characters from a movie that you have looked at. And then we will move on from there. So Azaria, you name one movie or so and a character. Same for you, Alicia. No? Or a book, maybe a book. Or a Once Upon a Time story. No?
Dr. Dolittle.
Dr. Dolittle. Okay, so who's the main character in that one?
Dolittle.
Dolittle, very good. Alicia?
There is a story with where stuffed animals are talking.
Stuffed animals are not Muppets.
I think
Probably Muppets. And there's a pig in it.
Toy Story.
No? Toy Story? No, I don't think Toy Story is. You can't remember. Well, your homework is to remember what the name of the movie is, right? So those persons in the movie, or those things in the movie, those animals in the movie that are talking, they're the characters. But do you know everything about the character in the first 5 minutes of the movie? No. But bit by bit, as the movie is playing, as the show is playing, as the cartoon is playing, you get to understand who Dolittle is, who Mirabelle is. Or if you were in this story, who Alicia is. Because I can't know everything about you in 5 minutes, right? But maybe if you're starring in a movie and I look at a movie for an hour, by the time I'm halfway in that movie, I know a lot more about you, right? So the other question is, how does the author reveal this information to you? So we're looking at the definition there, right? The process of revealing a character's personality or the development of a character. Because we said just now you don't know everything about the person on the first try, correct? You have to get to know them a little bit more. So how do we get to know about these characters? What the person who wrote the script for the movie or who's directing it or the story, as we read in the story, the writer in the story, how does he show us the personality of this character? Or how does he tell it to us? How do we get to know this information? Obviously, he uses words, right? But what exactly does he do, or what exactly would she do with the words? Describe the person. So basically telling us what the person looks like, right? Like what you did, Azaria, in your story. You said the girl had curly hair, she was fair in complexion and so forth, right? You're describing the character. So that's one way of telling your readers or showing your audience what your character looks like. And from their looks, you can pick up things about them. What else?
You can use certain words to describe them.
Pardon me?
You can use certain words to describe them.
I'll be a bit more specific. What certain words? Because just now we were talking about looking at the person, right?
Like if their personality is funny.
Good, like their funny personality, good. And that will be telling them, right? Where he or she would tell you about the character in the story, good. Anything else? What does the character itself does sometimes for you to know more about them?
What they do for
In the movie or in the
their
book?
life?
Yeah, what they do. So their actions then, right? What the character does, good. And do your characters only act in a movie? Do they just do things all the time? What else do they do? Have you ever seen Mr. Bean? He do a lot of things, right? A lot of actions, but one thing he doesn't do. What's that? He do a lot of crazy actions, right? Can you tell me what he doesn't do, but all the other movies would do it? Does he talk?
No.
No, he doesn't talk. But is that usual for movies, for the characters to not speak? No, you go to a movie and you expect to hear people talking, right? Or see them talking. And you read a book, and sometimes the characters in the books are also talking. For example, Alicia, in this story that you were writing, when the mother was talking to her son, remember the quotation marks I was telling you about? So what the writer do in a story is that he or she would put words into this character's mouth. So we have like a dialogue going there. And based on what the character, him or herself, is saying, you can pick up if it's a young person, if it's an older person. Because if you didn't tell me she was his mom, I probably could have picked up she was his mom because of what she was saying to her son, right? Good. So let's go to our another slide there. Now I have two words there. Very similar but very different words at the same time. Can one of you read them, please? Let's ask Azaria. What are the two words? Can you call them, please?
Direct, indirect.
Good. Direct and indirect. Now, if I say that person X is lazy, am I being direct or am I being indirect?
Indirect.
I'm calling this person lazy. Am I beating around the bush?
No.
No, I'm just saying what they are, right? So help me now put it over in a way that I am not being direct. I'm not telling them they're lazy, but I'm telling them they're lazy. What can I say? Sometimes parents do this to children as well when they're watching TV. Come up with your own sentence. So your mom or your dad wouldn't call you lazy, but what will they say to make you feel that same way? Or you might see it.
You watch television all the time?
Yeah. Say it how they would say it though.
You watch television all the time?
Yeah. Why are you watching television all the time? Why are you in your bed all the time? Or why are you not helping me with the housework? Have they said that sometimes? So do they actually want you to answer that question?
No.
No. But what are they telling you there?
You're lazy.
That you're lazy, right? You're being lazy because you're not helping around. They're doing everything and you're just, watching TV or whatever the case is. Or you're on your phone sometimes, right? And sometimes they get mad about it, right? But if you are not paying attention to them, will you realize that they're calling you lazy right away? No, you'll be, because something nice showing, that's why I'm watching TV. Then they might get a little bit annoyed with you, right? Good. So direct is when you say it as it is. For example, I am short. I know I'm short. So if somebody tell me, you're very short, I'm like, yeah, I know I'm short. But there are other things they can do or say to make me feel short too, right? Like I've heard this before. Someone once said, I can drink soup on your head because they're taller than me and they can put a bowl on my head and they can basically eat like from my head as a table, right? So they're not telling me I'm short, but from what they're telling me, I know exactly what they're hinting at, right? What about somebody who's tall? What is something you have heard persons say about them? They don't say, boy, you're very tall, or girl, you're very tall, but what are some things they say to make the person feel the same way?
You look like a stick.
You look like a stick. Okay, that can work sometimes. Sometimes they use that to mean the person's very slim too, right? Or if you look like a barrel, what does that mean? I mean, you're stout and fat probably, right? Or chubby or whatever. Or if you're standing in front of the TV and they want you to move, what is something they would tell you? Your father is... You guys don't know this one? If you're blocking somebody's view and they want you to move, like what's one thing they tell you in Georgetown, for example? They won't tell you to move, but they would say, like, your father is a glass maker. Have you heard that one before? No? Oh my goodness. So basically, can you help me figure that one out then, since you don't know it? If you're like how I'm standing here, let's say this was something written on the board here, or if this was the TV and you were looking at TV and I'm standing here, you tell me that if I think my father is a glass maker, then I would be... Glass is what? Glass is known to be what? Describe it for me.
Sand?
Yeah, it is processed sand, yeah, but what about it? What makes it different from concrete? Can I see through the concrete? No, unless I have like some supervision or something. But with glass, like people who wear glasses, I didn't wear mine today, but you guys have yours. You can do what with glass? You can see through it, right? So if they tell you, like, your dad is a glass maker, they're trying to say, you're not invisible, so we can't see through you. So what are they trying to tell you, really? If you're blocking their view of the TV, they want you to do what? Move so they can look at their TV, right? Good. Okay, that took a bit longer than I expected, but we got it eventually, right? So people would either tell you things exactly as they are, or they tell you in a whole lot of different words what they actually wanted to tell you in the first instance. For example, if somebody is late, and let's say you're the teacher in the class, one way of saying you're late is saying, oh, you're very late today. But what's another way maybe you can tell them that they're late? Maybe you can start looking at your watch or your phone, because most people choose their phones these days, right? If you start looking at their watch, then people associate that with time. So like, oh, Mrs. telling him or her that he or she is late because she's looking at her watch. She doesn't say you're late, but she looks at her watch and you're like, oh my God, she knows I'm late. So she doesn't have to tell you it, but she shows you it in this instance. All right, clear, everybody on the same page? So if they tell you it directly as it is, it would be direct or indirect? Direct. And if they are telling you it in a whole bunch of different words, it would be indirect. Remember when we were doing that part? No, I don't think it was your class. You probably missed this one. This was the grade 8 class when we were talking about the different kinds of questions. Some of the questions you can get exactly the answers from the text itself. And some questions, to answer it, you have to do a little bit of thinking. So there are different levels of questions. So it's similar to that. One of them, the answer is right there, and the other one, you have to think before you get the answer. So one way to remember this is with the acronym STEAL. And I don't mean like go thief somebody foul or something, right? So if you look on the board, we have S. What does the S stand for? What the character? Good, what the character says. And T, what the characters? What are the characters taught? So what are they thinking? E, what effect does he or she have on others? So let's talk about that one a little. So you know your characters are in a story, right? They're not the only person in the story. They have other characters there. So sometimes you can figure out what is going on with this character if this other person is, for example, scared. If this other person is scared of them, then it tells us, is that a nice, kind person?
No.
Probably a scary person, right? So the writer doesn't say this is a scary man. All he or she does is say, oh, children are scared of this person and wouldn't go next to his house. So that tells us what? That this person is probably big and scary, right? So he doesn't tell us this person is big and scary and these people are scared of him because he's big and scary. just says, children, stay away from this house because it's dark and whatever, whatever. And then we figure out the effect that this person has on the other characters in the story. And the A is, what are they? We talked about this one just now. What are the actions of the characters? What does the character do? And L, what does the character look like? Which is the easiest one to remember, right? What they look like. So let's go it over again. STEAL, S-T-E-A-L. Acronym, the S stands for what the character says. T stands for what the character thoughts are or thinking. E, the effect on others. A, action, the actions of the characters. And L, their looks, what they look like. Great. So let's look at your characters. So this is where we're going to talk a little bit about, well, Tiana isn't here today, but we have Alicia. And when we finish Alicia, so we're going to work on your character a bit. Right, Alicia? And then we'll work a bit on Azaria's characters. So we have some space here to type. Oops, sorry. Okay, great. So I want to type here. Should be able to type. Or give me a few seconds. It's taking a bit time to load. I think when I'm in a share mode, I can't type, but I can draw. All right, let's use the drawing equipment that we have. And we can't use green or yellow, so I'm going to use blue. All right, Alicia, tell us about your character. Your main character. Male, you're going to talk about the son or the mom?
The son.
Okay, so we know Alicia's character. What is your character's name?
Jack.
Jack. So I'm not exactly typing. I'm using my keyboard to do this here, so it will look a bit wacky. So your character's name is Jack. Tell us about Jack. How are you going to develop him? So we know he is a child who just wrote his exam and he got good results and people are celebrating, right? So what will Jack be saying? What will Jack be doing? What is Jack thinking? How do other people feel when it comes to Jack? So anyone, you can start with anyone.
He is a very sporty person.
So he's sporty, so we're going to use the word active. So if you're sporty, you're also active. What else? How old is this Jack?
He's 8 years old.
Jack is 8 and already write common entrance or NGSA?
12.
So he's 12, okay. So he's 12 years old. What else about Jack? So first, did he know his results at first?
No.
But then eventually he learned his results, right? So before he knew his results, he was what? Feeling what? What emotion was he feeling?
Anxious.
Anxious, good. So anxious here can be a good thing or a bad thing. In this case, was it a good thing? A-N. Was he feeling excited or was he feeling worried?
Worried.
Do you think you're feeling a little bit like Jack now, knowing that your results are coming out on Friday?
It feels like
Yeah, a little bit, okay. So he's active, he's 12, he's anxious because of his results coming out. How is he going to develop from this? So he's anxious now, but then this anxiety changes to what later?
excitement.
Good, so I'm going to draw an arrow down here to show that this anxiety that he has, or this anxious feeling that he has here, becomes excitement. What is the major action responsible? I think I made a mistake there. Good. What is the major action responsible for him changing from being anxious to being excited? You wrote it in your story. What's the major action that makes him change from being anxious to feeling excited?
Him opening his report card.
Good. When he opens his report card, that changes everything, right? So he went from being good. Go ahead. You're saying something? No? All right. Good. So we have a little bit more information about Jack, and you're developing him. How does he change later in the story from being like this?
It starts feeling overjoyed and starts.
Good, overjoyed. So we're going to leave excited because it means similar to overjoyed, right? The other question I have to ask you is, usually when a character goes through a major change, he changes. And this character development is not just him switching between emotions. So maybe at first he was worried about those things, but now he doesn't worry about it because he knows he studied, right? So he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. Good. So like, it's good that we have these feelings here, being anxious and feeling excited, but think about how he can change as a person, because those are emotions there, correct? And you can be anxious, you can be excited all in one day. But how can we change eventually? For example, you're going to secondary school now. Well, when you start school this September, and you were going to primary before. So when you're in primary school, you're running all over playing cricket or whatnot, right? Getting all sweaty or whatnot. When you start secondary school now, you think it's going to be the same running around again? No. You run around and the other children might be laughing at you for running around because you're running around like children, right? You're expected to act a different way when you go to secondary school. So sometimes the change in a character has to do with their development. So maturity. So when you get to secondary school, you start to think of children who are running around as being, I'm just going to use this word generally, right? Immature. And when you go to secondary school, you're thinking that you have to act more mature. You have to act more grown. You have to be more responsible. So before you could lose 10 pencils and you don't really care. But now you're at secondary and, you can't afford to lose your pens because pens are more expensive than pencils. So you have to be more careful now. So before you were careless and now you become a very caring person, care your things and so. So think about this as you're developing your story for Jack. Don't just make his emotions change and that's the only change that happens. We want a more long-lasting change. So he's sad before or he's happy now, but make it a little deeper. Like, how does he change overall, or how does he change more permanently then? Good. So that's my advice to you. So let's go to Azaria now. So we're going to continue with your description, Azaria. Remind me of the name of your character. Did you name your character?
Yeah.
What's the name of your character?
Ali.
Mm-hmm.
I like
How do you spell that?
ALIEKA.
A-L-I-E. Forgive my E. K-A. Okay, that's the best I can do right now. Yes. Tell me a little bit about her. How have you developed her so far? So, we know she's going to London on a trip with her mom, right? Is she worried? Is she excited? What feeling?
Excited.
She's excited. And what changes later on?
She's sad
Okay, why does she get sad?
because her father had to cancel.
Oh, so her father canceled on her. Well, yeah, that's always a sad thing. So she's excited and this changes to sadness. Good. And same advice I will give you with Alicia now. So excited and she becomes sad. This is in a day you can go through several different emotions, right? You can feel happy in the morning, you get sad later on, then you're okay afterwards. So how does she change overall? Does her father usually cancel on her? No, but this time he canceled. She was very disappointed. But then what's the lesson she can learn from that now? Did he just cancel on? Was it an important reason why he canceled on her?
Yeah.
Maybe he had some meeting to go to, right? And he couldn't go any more other time. And he needs to go to this meeting because he has to provide for you and whatever, the family and so forth, right? So it's important. So you also learn that sometimes you have to make sacrifices for your family And I think in the future, when you get your own family, you also learn that you will have to make sacrifices for your family too. Good. So even though you're sad, you get to understand why he didn't get to keep his appointment with you. And maybe you forgive him too, right? Because first you will be mad and then you will forgive him, hopefully. Good. So how does that sound? Sound good? All right. So remember what we spoke about? When we're talking about characterization is how this character in your story is developed. Now, if your story has 5 characters, do you have to focus on developing all your characters in the story? Which one or how do you decide which character that you're going to focus on?
The main one.
The main one. So the main one is the most important one in your story. In your story, Alicia, your main one is Jack. In your story, it is Alika. So basically, you're not going to go around describing every single character in your story. You describe the main one, and the main one is the one that develops. So first, the story starts. Think of it like a caterpillar. A caterpillar goes and spins a cocoon, and that turns into what? Eventually, when the caterpillar comes out of this cocoon, it is a butterfly. Excellent. So there's a big word for that, and that word is metamorphosis. You guys know that word?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. I should do a spelling quiz with you next. Spelling thing with you next. So the caterpillar changes from being this wormy looking thing and emerges to being something that flies. So it changes. So in your story, your character also needs to go through a transformation. They need to change. So sometimes your story can start with a little girl who is 9 years old, and by the time your story ends, this child has become a grandmother. So that's the change, that's a development, that's a physical development. But sometimes your character can be 10. They're still 10 at the end of the story, but their mindset towards something changes. So maybe they didn't like school before, and at the end of the story, now they like school. Or maybe they're scared of death, and at the end of the story, they accept that death is part of life, and they don't get depressed because of death. Good? All right, so to wrap up, Alicia will give me one example of how a character can change. So the same examples I was giving just now, how a character can change. And Azaria, you will tell us what is one way a writer can develop or show his character to readers. Remember, steal. Alicia first.
Okay, a character can change through different emotions
Mm-hmm.
and how the character expresses itself. Like how, like if they were doing something before and now there is sadness, so they'd go ahead and cry into it both.
Yeah. So maybe dealing with emotions is one way of it, right? So it's not just a change, switching between emotions like a switch. It's what motivates them to change. Or like we use the word just now, mindset, or we can use the other word, perspective as well. Or the way they see things, they change how they see it before. So good example. Let's have Azaria. How can a writer, how can an author show that his or her character is developing? Or, yeah.
Maybe it could be a good day at first and end up going the other side. Or like if it's like
Take your time, it's okay. You want us to give you a minute more? No, that? All right. So you're going to think about it and you're going to let me know later, right? Because we're running out of time and we'll have to switch over to Matt just now. So I just want to close off with saying that we did a good job with identifying how a writer can develop his character. And remember, steal. The S stands for what the character? Good. The T stands for what the character thinks. E, the effect it has on other characters. A, you remember this one, good, action. And L, how the character looks. Good. So remember that when you're writing and developing your characters. And remember, you're typing your story out and send to me so I can make the edits. because we need to move on to a different topic next Thursday. So that's all for this week. Thank you so much for joining, and those persons who are joining us from the live, thanks again. I'm going to hand you over to the math person who will be here with you shortly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Critical Math, grade 6 to 7. And we're continuing with our fractions to decimals concepts. And today we are looking at changing percent to fraction. All right, let's begin. Let's have a wonderful session today. All right, so our critical word here today is percent. So for us to change, hold on just a bit, I'll use black ink. So we're changing percent to fraction. All right, so that's our topic today. And we've been changing decimals to fraction and vice versa. So actually, this is needed to this. Okay, this is needed to make use of the value of percentage, because you've heard these terms before in calculation. All right? So that's in essence what we're trying to do here. All right? So in essence, what we're trying to do is to convert a percent to a fraction. And in doing that, most of us know the symbol that is used for percent, right? So the symbol used to represent percent is, and we know that symbol, right? So it's like a forward slash there and something like that. So that is a symbol used. So for example, if I'm saying, if I want to say 50%, symbolically I represent it as 50, and I use that symbol there, representing percent. Right? So if you've come across this concept before, and percent means, you know, for every 100, right? That's what it actually means. So it's simple to understand, as it is a scale of from 1 to 100, right? So if I ask you on a scale of 1 to 100, how you rate yourself in terms of intelligence? Would you say 50%? You might say 70%. You might say 90%, or IQ, right? Or rate yourself in terms of how you like something, or your favorite dish, right? Or your favorite sweet, right? So you give a value. So from 1 to 100, right? You get an idea as to where you stand. All right. So what we're gonna examine here, we're gonna look at 3 simple ways in which we can convert a percent to a fraction. So the first way is where we have a whole number, right? First way is where you have a whole number. So for example, 45%. So in essence, what you're doing, you're replacing that symbol, right? The symbol that represents percent. And you're dividing that value, that whole number, by 100. Or you can say you're multiplying that whole number by 1 over 100. Same concept, right? So you can either say, so that is equal to 45 divided by 100, or 45% equals 45 times 1 over 100. It's the same concept. So you still end up at 45 over 100. So dividing by 100 means you're multiplying by 1 over 100. Likewise, if you're dividing by 2, it means you're multiplying by 1 over 2. All right? Similar concept. So what is crucial here too is that once you're going to express that whole number or that percent as a fraction, well, it's obvious we have to do what? What do we have to do? Is it in its lowest term? No. So you'll have to reduce the fraction to its lowest terms, right? And remember, in our previous session, we've examined how we would normally convert or change a fraction or reduce a fraction to its lowest terms. And one of the ways that we have examined was using our factor trees, which give you a visual representation of how, or an easy way in which we can reduce our fraction, right? I know some of you know your tables, so you could probably say 5 could go into 45, 9 times. And 5 can go into 100 how many times? 20. So in its lowest terms, 45% is actually 9 out of 20. Any questions so far? Good. Or you can use your factor trees, right? So you're using the prime factors and you reduce, and then you do your cancellations, just like in the last class. So if we can just recap a bit in terms of our factor trees, right? So we're trying to reduce 4 to 5. So it would be 5 times 9. And then we reduce 9 as 3 times 3. So these are our prime factors. All right, everything building from what we did before. So 4 to 5 equals 5 times 3 times 3. All right, it's a similar concept. Over 100. And in terms of, let's do it somewhere in the corner here. Let's see, 100. We start off with 2 because we know it's even and it's prime. Then we go 50. And 50 can be broken down into 5. 5 what? And 10. 5 times 10. And then, oh, this is terrible here. And then we know, let me switch over here. 10 can break down into 2 times 5. Right here. So 100 in terms of prime factors, we'll have 2 times 5 times 2 times 5. Right? My tree is a bit broken. So in terms of cancellations, we have 5 and 5. Anything else? No. So hence we have 9 over 20. All right? So that's another way in terms of checking using our prime factors. All right? Questions? Not as yet. Simple. So you would have done some of this before. All right? Additionally, if you had, we're still on the whole number concept. So if we had, for example, 100% to convert into a fraction, what would be your result?
100 over 1,000.
Why would you say 100 over 1,000? So all we're doing is replacing this symbol with, so it's 100 over 100, huh? Because you're replacing the symbol, right? Or you can look at it like this. I think it's going to be a little easier. 100, because that symbol is saying multiply by 1 over 100. So you see what's happening. So you have 100 over 100. So what is the end result here? 1. So these two can cancel here. Right off the bat, and you get 1. So you have a whole number instead, which is a whole. Right? 1. As a fraction is actually 1 over 1, right? But we do not, it is understood that it is over 1. So we do not write 1 over 1. Right? Because it is understood that the denominator is 1. Questions?
No.
Is it clear? Good. So if you have a scenario of 200%, 200%, what is going to be your result after converting that to a fraction? Two. Great. It's 200 times 1 over 100. And so it's 200 over 100. And this is where you have. So it's 2 over 1. So you have a whole number instead. All right? So we have a whole number instead. Any question? Cool. All right, so the other scenario that we have, so the first scenario we looked at is a whole number, right? So we have a whole number in terms of percent, and we're trying to convert that into a fraction. The second scenario is where we have a mixed number percent, right? So we have a mixed number percent, and we're converting that to a fraction. So for example, so remember a mixed number is you have a whole and a part, exactly. So for example, 12.5%. So there are several things that you can do with this one in particular. So the first thing that you can do here is that you can convert that mixed number into what? What do we usually do when we have mixed number?
Improper.
Exactly. So we convert them into an improper fraction. So we're multiplying the denominator by the whole number, and then we're adding the numerator. All right? So it's 12 times 2, which is 24. 24 plus 1. So that's 25 over 2%. So that's how we write that. Make sense?
Yeah.
Great. So to convert that into a fraction, remember we replace, so we write back 25 over 2. The percent sign is replaced by 1 over 100 here. And notice you can do your calculations. You can do some simplifying right there, right? In terms of multiplying fractions as well. So that concept is also coming up here. All right? So we can either say 25 into 25, 1. 25 can go into 100 how many times?
4 times.
4 times. So we have 1 times 1 that will give us 1. And 2 times 4 will give us 8. All right. Any questions? All right. So some of us may want to have 25 divided by 2 multiplied by 1 over 100. And so you can do it like this. So 25 times 1 will give us 25. Right? And 2 times 100 could give us 200. And then you break it down like that. Right? 1 over. You can break it down like that. Well, of course, you can use your factor trees, your prime factor trees as well, right? The other way, that brings us to the third concept. Now, sometimes so in this second scenario, we have 12.5. The half is represented here as a fraction. The half can also be represented as a decimal, right? So that takes us to our third scenario where we have decimal percent to fraction. All right, so 3 scenarios. Whole number percent to fraction. You have a mixed number percent to fraction, and here we have a decimal percent. we converting that to fractions. So 3 different scenarios. And you can see like the second scenario can play out into the third one. So you'll see it exactly what I mean. So let's start off with a simple scenario and then we build on that. For example, we have 7.5%. All right. So this concept is going to bring out when you're dividing by multiples of 10, right? Or when you're dividing by 100, what happens, right? Exactly. So 7.5%. So we are replacing the percent with 1 over 100, right? So we are expected to have here 7.5 multiplied by 1 over 100, right? So that will give us 7.5 over 100. Now, so when we're dividing by 100, so what we want to do, we want to make that numerator into a whole number. All right? And to make that numerator into a whole number, right, we will multiply the numerator by 10. Because if you notice here in terms of, so it means we want to move that decimal point once in that direction. All right? And when you're dealing with fractions, whatever you do with the numerator, you have to perform the same with the denominator. All right? So if you're, think you follow what's happening?
Yes.
So whatever you do at the top, you have to do at the bottom. So you can't do something at the top, which is in the numerator, not apply it to the denominator. All right? So it means then we have to multiply the bottom by 10 as well, sorry. All right? So let me make an extension here so you can see what's happening. So 7.5 becomes what? 75 over 100 times 10 gives us 1,000. Great. 1,000. So how do we reduce that fraction to its lowest terms? Yes, you can go with factories. Very well. Very well. So let's go on a different page. So for those of us who are viewing for the first time, they're going to get to see how we use factor trees for us to reduce array. We can, because any number can be expressed as a product of its prime, right? That's where we started off. So 75. So it ended in 5, so it's divisible by 5. So 5 is prime. So what times what will give us 75? 15. Great. We need to break down 15. 15 will give us
3 and 5.
3 and 5. Great. So actually 75 as a product of prime. Let's start off with the smallest one first. So it's 3 times 5 times 5. Now 1,000 look very huge, right? So let's go with a big number. 1,000. All right, it's even. So we can start off with the smallest prime here. Even prime, that's 2. 2 times what?
500.
Great. 500. 500 is even again. So it's 2 times 2 times
250.
250. Great. It's even again, so let's go. So it's 250. Or really, you can also use this. Look, this is what we can use to look, make life easy. All right, so we can have, so we know here is 250. So 250 can be 25 times 10, right? Right? And then we can do 25 would be 5 times 5. And then 10 would be 2 times 5. So we can have that as well. So all the end, where the branches end there, you have your prime. So let me draw a line here, put 1000. And let's put our primes. Smallest. 2's, how many 2's? 3 2's, 2 times 2 times 2. How many 5's? 3. All right. 5 times 5 times 5. All right. Great. So, cancellation occurring. Let me use red. 1 5 with 1 5. This 5 with that 5. And what do we seem to get here? So let me write this somewhere here. I'm not utilizing my board properly. Over 1000 as a fraction in its lowest terms. We have the number 3 in the numerator. And in the denominator we have
40.
40. Great. Right. Was that so hard? No. So you see, notice here, right? Notice what we did here. We split the number, right? And then you still find the primes. So rather than going, here you'll have a large number again, you can split it, right? And you still find your primes. All right? That is also possible. Any questions?
No.
Cool. So going back to our, so we've examined whole number percent to fraction. We've looked at mixed number percent to fraction. And in the third scenario, we have the decimal percent to fraction. Now, you can go interchangeably between one or the other, right? For example, you can go interchangeably between the mixed number into the decimal. All right, so let's go back to, remember our example before, we had 12.5%. So let's remember 12, use black. So you remember 12.5%. All right, so in the first scenario, remember, we converted this into a mixed number. That is also possible. And we can also convert this into a, what? Into a decimal, right? So we'll have, so that would be equal to 12 point, what is a half as a decimal? 0.5. So it's actually 12.5%. 12.5%. All right, so you can have a choice as to what method you want to use or what algorithm you want to go through. All right, so here it's 12.5 over 100. All right, so we can compare in terms of efficiency, which one is faster. All right, so here, so we want to make 12.5 into a whole number, right? So it means we have to multiply the numerator by 10, and we will also have to do the same in the denominator as well. So we'll have 125 over 1000. So you see what's up? All right. So you see what's happening here. So we have see what's happening with the fraction, right? Numerator is a bit large. Denominator is a bit larger. But we have done it before. So So you can, in your own way, right, try to examine, which method best is for you. Because the 12.5%, when you convert that into, we got 25 over 2. And then we multiply that by 1 over 100. And so it's easy to do our calculations with 25 and 100 rather than 125 over 1,000. Right? You think you follow?
Yeah.
All right. So you have options, right, to decide which one is more efficient. All right. So this afternoon we've examined converting a percent for fraction, and we've looked at 3 scenarios: whole number percent to fraction, mixed number percent to fraction, and we also examined the decimal percent to fraction, right? And notice one can be used interchangeably based on what you're doing with each other. So whether you want to work with a mixed number or you want to work with a decimal number. So you have that choice, all right? So thank you for being with us this afternoon, and see you in our next session on Thursday. Thank you.